We are back live with the Food for Thought live series. I'm very excited to be back. I'm very grateful to be here at all. And what I mean by that, aside from life itself, is the fact that I was just talking to our guest tonight, who I'm about to introduce you to, about the fact this is episode 14. Can you believe? Episode 14. And I want to take this opportunity with that in mind to just say an absolutely enormous thank you to all of my guests up to this point. They've been absolutely incredible. They've been exactly what I wanted them to be, and I knew that they would be, which is inspirational and empowering and enlightening and just plain wonderful. And without them, obviously, this doesn't exist. This doesn't happen. And the fact that I get to shine a spotlight on these people, and I'm so delighted to tell you more people going on into the future. We've got such a list of people. This is going to be going on for quite some time, and let's hope that's the case, because there's lots to talk about. And it really seems to be working from the feedback that I've received. It does seem that you guys are indeed finding it inspirational and empowering and informative and educational and all the things that matter. So it's working. And the second group of people I want to thank are you guys, for watching this, for tuning in every week, more than every week, of course. There's, some 2 or 3 episodes a week up till this point. And your support is equally imperative. It doesn't happen without you guys. It's pointless if you're not there. And your feedback and your encouragement and your gratitude and all the wonderful messages I've received and the connections that this has made for me, and I know for some of you guys, the wonderful ideas that people like Darren, who I see is back on tonight, came up with the discussion forum on Facebook, and Ariana, with your unbelievable support and all the retweets and the posting on Facebook to advertise these talks. It's so wonderful, and there's so many of you. I see you guys appearing. Alison, you're back, and Linda, you're back, and the most wonderful things are happening. I want to say hello to all of you, but of course there are so many of you watching already. I couldn't possibly list you all. But I just wanted to take this opportunity to say such an enormous thank you to all of my previous guests, all of my forthcoming guests, including the one you're about to meet, and to you, because this is wonderful. It really is wonderful. And tonight, I think is going to be exemplary in that regard, because as we've discussed every single time, the idea is to inspire and empower, to show you what you can do in the absence of being able to dip into your pocket and make a donation, which of course some people still can do. But I don't want to ask for that, because it just feels wrong at this crazy time. But what can we do? What can we be proactive with, stay involved, make a difference, and keep this wonderful community of ours together? And so tonight, I have the honor of being able to introduce you to somebody who exemplifies and personifies exactly that, and has done so to such effect that probably all of you already know a lot of what he's achieved, because it's been so front and center, mainstream in all of our lives, and we'll talk about that tonight. So it is with an enormous amount of humility and gratitude and pleasure that I introduce you to my friend, Mr. Eduardo Gonçalves, the founder of the campaign to ban trophy hunting. Eduardo, how are you, my friend?
I'm all right. Even better for seeing you with that great T-shirt. And no, thanks for that.
I can get you one.
Oh, they're a bargain. But actually, the risk of ingratiating myself with you, I mean, you were saying thank you to all these people. I think we should say thank you to you as well for making these conversations happen, because I think they are really inspiring a lot of people. And I know you give an awful lot of your time to a lot of organizations. You've helped us out. You've been there for the campaign to ban trophy hunting, and a lot of other organizations too. So I'm going to put it on record, my appreciation. I'm sure I'm speaking for everyone else who's been on these shows of yours. So thank you, Dan.
It's very, very kind of you, sir. And I appreciate your very generous words. But this is all about you. So I'm going to turn it right back on you. And but that's very kind of you. And it's a wonderful thing to say. But as I've said to some of my other guests, I don't get to do this without the likes of you to shine the spotlight on. And so, what you guys do, what you personally do, it's so invaluable to us and to the cause and to the animals. And so, I'll show you guys my notes for tonight. There you go. It's a blank sheet of paper, except for the names of the names of the two people, one of whom you're seeing and one of whom is the next guest. I haven't made any notes, and the reason why is because Eduardo and I have had conversations about this, and there's so much to talk about that we're both so passionate about. There's no cause for notes, no need for direction. There's no end of things we could talk about, and this therefore is going to be probably a 16-hour. I think the limit is 16 hours on these broadcasts. We're going to see if we can hit that limit. No, I'm just kidding. Right. We'll let you go. So Eduardo's joining us from Portugal. So I think you're already an hour ahead of us, if I'm not mistaken, but you might be the same time.
Actually, we're exactly the same time zone.
You're the same time. Okay.
We're back and forward the same time as the UK all year round. Yeah.
Great stuff. All right. Well, Eduardo, tell us, because I know we literally could spend hours talking about all the various issues that you and I share interest and passion for. But tell me, because I think a lot of people know your background is from you were the CEO of the League Against Cruel Sports. But really, what's current and what's on my T-shirt and what we're here to talk about is the campaign to ban trophy hunting. Tell me how that came to be in the first place.
Almost by accident. I had to actually leave my job at the League because I became ill. And so I sort of went back to doing something I'd started, just as a hobby really, but something I'd started very early in my career, which I was on radio. I used to do local radio. In fact, I think I did the first ever environmental news program on any commercial radio station in Britain. Anyway, I went back and started doing some podcasts. And there was one story that I came across, which was about how Botswana, which had banned trophy hunting, it was just about to allow elephant trophy hunting to restart. And it kind of like, what? I had that kind of reaction, which I think is the same reaction a lot of people actually had when there was the whole Sessile, the lion fiasco 5 years ago. By the way, we're just about to come up to the 5th anniversary of the shooting of Sessile the lion. And, there was international outrage about that. About 1,000 lions are still shot every year by trophy hunters. There's about 20,000 lions left in the wild. Anyway, we'll come back to that. So I came across this story about, how they were doing this in Botswana. And I just couldn't understand it. Why on earth would they want to do that? And it just seemed absolutely nonsensical. And then I started researching and then found, that elephant populations, estimates that they were 20 million in the 19th century. And now there's about 400,000. About a third of which were in Botswana. So Botswana actually has by far the largest population of elephants of any country,
right?
Of African elephants specifically,
right?
And I started talking to some of the people that I'd worked with when I was at the League and some of their people, and quite quickly people like Peter Egan, Ranulph Fiennes, and then Joanna Lumley, and then a few others came along: Ricky Gervais, Stephen Fry, Nicky Campbell, who you were talking to just the other night. Bill Bailey. Anyway, all of us sort of thought, look, this is just nuts. We've got to do something about it. And so we started a bit of a campaign just around that. Without any sort of structure or form. And I remember there's one really, really cold day that we went to the Botswana High Commission in London and handed in, this great big petition with, I think, 250,000 signatures on it. And I was there with, Bill Oddie was there, Ranulph Fiennes were there. He'd driven all the way down from Cheshire. And, he'd actually arrived an hour early and it was bitterly, bitterly cold. And so there was this little hotel just around the corner and they let him sit in the reception to warm up. It was so cold. Anyway, we did this. And, Peter Egan was there. Carol Royal was there. Anyway, we thought, listen, we can't just stop here. What are we going to do about it? And that's really when the idea came. Well, we've got to have a campaign because there's lots of organizations out there who say trophy hunting is wrong, it's bad. And would like it to stop. There wasn't a specific concerted campaign that said, right, this is what we're working on, this is our goal, or that had, if you like, a strategy. What does success look like? What does stopping trophy hunting actually look like? And so with a group of us, and we've got the support of people like Damien Aspinall, who's a great guy, Julian Richer Sounds. I bought my first hi-fi system from him when I was 15 years old. It still works, actually. My tape and my amp do, anyway. And Julian Richer, he supports so many great organisations, including, people for disadvantaged groups, homeless people, but also, he funds actually this campaign against corporate tax fraud, against corporate CEOs. And he's a CEO. He's brilliant. I love his style. And he's a great rock drummer as well. Anyway, so a group of us got together. And we launched this, and we thought, right, first step, we're going to get the UK to ban the import of hunting trophies. That's the first thing we're going to do.
Right.
And we use that as a launching pad for getting on our goal, or getting on our journey towards abolition of trophy hunting. And there are a couple of key things on the way that we need to do. One of them is do something about CITES. Now, CITES, Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species. So that's the wildlife trade law. And that law says you're not allowed to trade in endangered species, or if you are going to, it's got to be in really controlled circumstances, or they've got to be exceptional reasons for doing it, and so on. Only problem with CITES is that trophy hunting isn't covered by it. So, right, you can go and try and shoot a rhino for its horn, and to sell its horn, you'll get done for that. You can go and shoot the same rhino and take the horn home with you, say that you're a trophy hunter, that's all right. It is absolutely nuts. The system is nuts. I mean, and tens of thousands of protected animals, endangered species, are shot by trophy hunters legally every year. And so it's kind of understanding that, and how the international law works, and so trying to sort of then map out how do we get onto a road towards abolition. Anyway, so we started with the naturally, because that's where we're based, and we have greater access there as well to the media and politicians. So we essentially tried to build a movement, a coalition. Brought together a coalition of NGOs, reached out to the general public and got people to support the group, then reached out to members of parliament of all parties. In fact, the first thing that we did, I think, was November, December, it's just after the Botswana High Commission handing in the petition. We invited, and Bill Oddie kindly gave his time for this, MPs to come and meet with Bill Oddie and to sign this early day motion saying they wanted a ban on trophy hunting, and get their photo done, be able to post it on their newsletters, their websites, and their social media platforms. Hey, I've been with Bill Oddie, and it's for a cause that I think you, my constituents, will probably support as well. There's the man himself. There you go.
There he is.
And it was crazy, because what happened, we had this tiny little room booked for about 2 hours. Well, we had a queue of MPs. In fact, by the time I got there, Tom Watson, who was then the deputy leader of the Labour Party, he was already waiting for us, waiting to have us. And we had everyone. We had the shadow leader of the House of Lords, Baroness Angela Smith, the shadow attorney secretary. We had Jeremy Corbyn, Caroline Lucas. We actually had 53 MPs in the space of 2 hours. And basically, it was like it reminded me of the Generation Game with Bruce Forsyth. You remember that? The conveyor belt, right?
Yeah, I do.
You had one MP, you'd sign them in, photo with Bill Oddie, come over here, sign the early day motion, come over here, we're going to do a 30-second film of you saying why trophy hunting is wrong, and we'll post it up on social media. Bob's your uncle, out the door, next. And we did that for 2 hours, and poor old Bill's knees were going by the end of it. Few problems, and it was exhausting, but it was brilliant, because then you had all of these MPs. They were putting stuff on their websites, they were putting stuff in their newsletters, and they were signing the early day motion. And it was a cross-party early day motion. It ended up being, I can't remember, things like 180 MPs from 8 different political parties, including 5 Westminster party leaders, which is unheard of. That's never ever happened, and it's one of the most popular early day motions in Parliament of all time. And that got things going, and then we started reaching out to the media, and we were doing investigations. I mean, my background, I used to be a journalist, used to be an investigative journalist, and so it was delving into the data and trying to find the case studies and who was doing what, etc. And so started reaching out to different newspapers and broadcast organizations and getting them interested in the story, and obviously finding the angles that were going to be of interest to them, and they could see that this was a story that was going to appeal to their readers, because at the end of the day, they've got to do something which The punter is to buy the paper, because then if the punter buys the paper, the advertisers advertise in the paper, so they don't just get the copy price of the paper, they get the adverts as well.
Absolutely,
and so you've got to try to sort of work out, I guess, how you can make the system work for you. And so, we've got different news. Again, we didn't want to sort of just position it as this wing of the media was interested in it. No, I mean, we've had, in the last 12 months, actually, we've had 2 editorials in the Times endorsing
the Times, no less.
The Times, probably the most, I don't know, respectable or reputable newspaper in the world, certainly the best known, probably. Anyway, and the first editorial, talked about, it said the campaign to ban trophy hunting today has said this, and we completely agree. And the arguments, they're all nonsense. The other arguments by the other side, they're all nonsense. Which was like, my goodness. And in the same week, the Daily Star did an editorial, so right at the other end of the spectrum. And then we did an event in the House of Commons, and I invited the editor of the Daily Mirror to be one of the speakers. So the speakers, if I remember right, there was Zach Goldsmith, who was actually the person who put down the early day motion, who's now the Conservative minister. We had Ranulph Fiennes, who's been one of our top supporters right from the beginning. And we had lots of celebrities. I think, Dan, you were there. I think you saw. I mean, we had people like Kevin Peterson was there.
Absolutely,
Even taller in real life than he looks out there on the middle. He is huge. I love cricket, and I love Kevin Peterson as a cricketer. I've never met him face to face until that day, and he's like, I'm big boy. He's like looking down on me. It was incredible. We had all of these stars, and Vicky Michelle, remember Yvette from Hello Hello, and Jan Leeming, and Annette Crosby, Peter Egan. Anyway, all of these wonderful people came along, and of course your very good self. And Alison Phillips agreed to be one of the keynote speakers. And I actually asked her, I mean, I've sort of worked with her in the past, and I know that one of the reasons she became a journalist was because the Mirror in years gone by had done some very powerful campaigns on seal cubbing. And that was one of the things that inspired her to become a journalist. I read this online. Okay, I researched her. And I thought, right, I'm going to make a pitch to her. And I'd already started getting a couple of stories into the paper, and it was getting a lot of pickup amongst the readers. They were commenting on it and sharing it. So obviously it was going down well in the newsroom. I said, come on, Alison, let's get you as a keynote speaker with all these other people. Let's, come and say why it's important to your readers. And she did. To her credit, she came along. And obviously I'm hoping it's the beginning, of something, of a relationship that we can grow. It's about opening the door. And sure enough, later that night, she texted me quite late at night. She goes, Eduardo, I've been thinking about this. After today, I think the Mirror needs to do a big campaign on this. I thought, bless you. That's what I wanted you to say. I didn't ask you, but, this is where she said, and she approached me. She said, this is what we're going to do. And true to their word, they've done at least half a dozen front page stories. Yeah,
they've been amazing, huh?
I've lost count actually of the number of stories that they've done.
But credit to you, because credit to you for getting them on the front pages so often, because they need to be compelled by it and it needs to sell papers. So yeah, it's great that they've done it, but it's thanks to you that it's there in the first place.
Well, I think one of the things that all of us, campaigners and NGOs and so on, we need to understand how the world works, if you like, how the system works, and try to make it work for us. Right. And at the end of the day, the media has got to put out a story which is going to be, of interest to its readers.
Quite.
And what are the hooks, the ingredients of a story that's going to work? Well, it's got to obviously have a UK angle. It's got to have some element of, of hypocrisy, perhaps.
Right.
There's got to be some solid data, some reliable research. And, one of the things that I've spent a lot of my time over the last 12, 18 months doing is my head is buried inside the CITES trade database and, researching all of the different numbers and what trophies go where and by whom and et cetera, et cetera. You got to, you got to brush up and know your onions. You got to know what you're talking about, because at the end of the day, the paper needs to know that it's got a credible source. And if it's got a credible source and it's coming up with good stories, then they're going to come back to you and come back to you again. And the same actually goes for the political system, I say. And one thing I always say to people is, look, MPs, politicians, we hire them, right? So every 5 years, we have, if you like, a job interview with them. And we say, right, we're going to take you on for the next 5 years to do this job for us. And here's the contract. You've got 5 years to do it. We're going to pay you to do it because we pay MPs out of our taxes. and we want you to represent our interests in Parliament. And that's the way we should be dealing with it, approaching the political system. Politicians are there to do our bidding. And I've done all sorts of things in my life. One of the things I used to do, I worked in Parliament, I worked in the US Congress as well. And so I can tell you, and I worked in government, I can tell you that politicians do keep an eye on the postbag. They are always monitoring what people are writing to them about, or these days emailing or ringing them or turning up to their constituency surgeries to badger them about. So they are there doing our job for us. So make them work for you, right?
Right.
You pay them. So whether you use them or not, it's down to you, because at the end of the day, it's all the same to them. They're still getting paid. You are still paying for them out of your taxes.
Yeah.
So given that you're doing that, you might as well make them flipping well work for you, right?
Too right.
You system, and there's different ways that you can have greatest effect. In the days of email nowadays, actually, that's kind of become a bit like white noise. So a lot of the stuff that goes into their inbox and their emails, it doesn't have the same impact. It certainly doesn't have the same impact as if you go to the effort of writing a letter, posting it, licking a stamp, putting it in the post box. That has greater impact because that shows you've done a bit more. Also, if you pick up the phone to their office, and you can ring any MP in the UK by going through the House of Commons switchboard and saying, I'd like to speak to X, the name of your MP, and they'll put you through. And of course, your local MP, they'll have a website and they'll advertise where they do their weekly surgeries. So this is where they open their doors for you to come and tell them what you want them to do. And if you've got a problem, obviously, to help sort them out. But also, that's your in. Right, that is your opportunity to go in and say, right, Mr. or Mrs. X, I'm really angry about this, or I really want action to be taken about this, or I want you as my elected representative to go to the House of Commons and do X, Y, or Z. Right, and we have to lose our fear or think that politicians are above us.
Yeah.
Our employees. They're our employees. So, again, thinking about it from the politician's perspective. Putting them in a room, having a photo with Bill Oddie saying stop trophy hunting, that works for them. Works for us, obviously. And then all of a sudden, we've got a very popular EDM, early day motion, which means there's pressure on the government. There's pressure on the government. This is no longer just one of those millions of issues that are out there. Suddenly, this is one of the most popular motions that's been put down in Parliament for years. And in a completely unprecedented move, you've got 8 parliamentary parties represented, including 5 Westminster party leaders. That's never happened before.
Absolutely unprecedented.
Yeah, actually did a letter in the Times because the December election, there's actually been a slight sort of shake-up in Parliament. So we've got MPs from all 9 parliamentary parties that take their seat in Westminster, not Sheffield. So all of the others, we had MPs from every single party signed up to this letter. Times published it. Again, that gives a sign to the public, to politicians, that this isn't just a niche interest. This is something that everyone cares about. And of course, then we also commissioned a poll, an opinion poll. We commissioned a couple actually, and we did 2 on our own. We did 1 in partnership with Humane Society, and they all say the same in slightly different ways. But basically, they all say: A, trophy hunting should be banned. B, Britain should ban the import of hunting trophies. And C, and I think this is really important actually. C, if there's a ban on hunting trophies, they should be for all species, not just endangered animals. Should be for all species, because fundamentally this is wrong. It isn't about saying, this monkey, of which there's only 100 left, is more important than that monkey, of which there's 100 million. It's saying that killing monkeys who share over 90% of their DNA with us is wrong. It's about saying, because this is the thing. At the end of the day, trophy hunting is just so nuts. It is not got anything to do with tradition, right? You go to traditional African societies or Inuit communities, and so it's not a tradition to kill animals for sport. It's an
orthodontist from Minnesota half the time, so
yeah, it is simply killing an animal for entertainment. Now, let's imagine a person. You're not going to be this, but let's say you, Dan, go and shoot a cat for fun, right? The law will come down you like a ton of bricks, and rightly so. And I come and visit you in jail. A lot of people wouldn't, but you would be done for that, and rightly so.
Rightly so.
But if you go and shoot a wildcat for fun, not only is that okay, you might get a prize for it. one of the big hunting organizations like Safari Club International, who have 80 different awards that they give out to dozens of hunters every year for shooting as many animals as they can, you could get a statue from them for doing that. They have things like the Cats of the World Award, where basically to get this prize, you have to go around the world, all of the continents, and shoot different species of wild cats. So lions, leopards, cheetahs, jaguars, cougars, etc. Wildcat. I mean, this is a wildcat is almost identical in DNA to a domestic cat. Yet a domestic cat, shoot that, you go to jail. Wildcat, African wildcat or European wildcat, you shoot that, you can get a prize. I mean, how crazy is the system? It's
so twisted, and it's indicative of just how badly we've lost our way as a species. And you know, I think that the burning, I don't even want to dignify it by calling it a question, because those of us who know that there is no question. But I guess the wool that's been pulled over people's eyes in the wider population, if they were to engage in it at all, is that it's part of a conservation effort. And I hear this plenty, and I know that you're a man who's armed with so much information that disputes that. But you know, and I'd like you to get into that. But just before you do, I'm reminded of a day when I was in South Africa and I was talking to a hunter, which in itself was quite a challenge, because you know, you find yourself on such a different level from a person, and you have so little in common. It's very it's kind of painful to hear their thought process. And I asked him a very simple question when we got into this conversation. It was a very civil conversation. He was a perfectly pleasant gentleman, aside from the fact that he took pleasure in going out and killing animals for sport. And I asked him a simple question, which was, you know, obviously these animals come at a fairly big ticket in some cases. They all cost money. If it's about conservation, why not donate that money to the preserving the life of the animal rather than taking the life of the animal? Exactly. And that absolutely dumbfounded him. And not just because there isn't an answer to it, but because he'd never contemplated that viewpoint. It never occurred to him that you could protect the life of the animal, because and that kind of speaks to the fact that you're so well versed on that. It's not about protecting life. It's not about conserving other creatures in the same species population. It's nothing to do with that. It's a cover. And I know that you know more than most about that. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, where to begin? I mean, of course, it's nonsense. They say when you actually delve into the forums that these hunting guys go on and actually talk about it openly amongst themselves. And this is one of the things that I do in my book. By the way, I'm going to do a shameless plug. Trophy hunters.
Oh, listen, hey! Wait, I can do a way better shameless plug. Hold on, check this out. We'll do a shameless plug.
Oh,
if we're going to shamelessly plug, we're going to do it properly. Watch this. Boom.
Oh, brilliant! Thank you, Dan. Thank you.
There we go.
Well, look, one of the things that I reveal in there is the conversations that trophy hunters actually have amongst themselves. So when they come out in public and say, oh, you know, this is all great for conservation. Oh, and it's creating jobs and helping the poor Africans, etc. Right. When they actually talk about it amongst themselves, they don't talk about, oh, yeah, I did this for conservation. They talk about it as something that they enjoy. They do this because they enjoy it.
Yes, indeed.
And they say the most extraordinary things. I mean, there's one guy that I quote in there. I'm going to quote exactly what this guy says. He says, did you ever get up feeling like you just had to kill something? Right? This is a guy. But there's another guy who talks about, you know, the excitement of seeing the head of a lion explode in a cloud of smoke when he shoots it, and he says that there's nothing more fulfilling in life than hunting an elephant. Right? This is actually what these people are like. But of course, look, it's got nothing to do. Trophy hunters are not people who've gone through university doing conservation biology or whatever, and they come to the end of their studies and they've decided, do you know what? I've just realized that the best way to do my profession, to conserve wildlife, is to go out there and shoot animals. That is not what happens. Trophy hunters are not biologists. They're hunters. They're people who like to shoot animals. And cool. If trophy hunting was so great for conservation, then why are all the species that trophy hunters like to hunt most going down the pan? Yeah, in the 1950s, there was about 500,000 lions. There's about 20,000 today. African elephants, I was saying before, there was 20 million of them in the 19th century before the British arrived in Africa and started shooting them on. And by the way, elephants are still the most popular trophy for a British trophy hunter, right? We are one of the worst in the world when it comes to hunting elephants.
Right.
And at the moment, the number of elephants that are being shot by both trophy hunters and poachers combined is greater than the number of elephants being born each year. So even before you get into the diseases and droughts and all the rest of it, elephants are losing from day one. But what you need to do, of course, who are the people who are saying that trophy hunting is great for conservation? And this is kind of the big thing, really, that I hope comes out in the book. And that is that the trophy hunting industry is reinventing itself as a conservation organization in order to stop it being regulated and banned. And one of the things they've done is they've created conservation front organizations to do this. So as well as calling themselves conservation, so the NRA, right, the gun rights group, the National Rifle Association, they now call themselves a conservation organization. Safari Club International, which is the world's biggest trophy hunting lobby group, and which openly boasts it spent $140 million since the year 2000 lobbying politicians in order to protect the freedom to hunt, it calls itself a conservation organization. And they've created these front organizations with lovely fluffy names. There's Conservation Visions, there's Conservation Frontlines, there's Conservation Force. Conservation Force was set up by the president of Safari Club International. By the way, he's the guy who wrote about how exciting it was to see a lion's head explode in a cloud of smoke, and who said nothing is more fulfilling in life than shooting an elephant dead. And there's other organizations exactly the same that give them the impression that they're conservation. One is called the True Green Alliance. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard of the True Green Alliance.
No.
The guy who set it up, it's called Ron Thompson. Ron Thompson has shot more than 5,000 elephants. He openly boasts in his books about having hunted more than any other person alive. He talks about, and I go into detail in the book, about how he talks about the adrenaline rush of shooting elephants. He shot about 6,000 animals in all. He boasts about having killed dozens of elephants in the space of a few minutes, etc., etc. He is a conservationist, apparently. So this is what we're dealing with. But what the trophy hunting industry does is it raises a lot of money, and then it spends it in three particular ways. One is lobbying. So, as I said, it spent about 140 million, just Safari Club International. It's put a hell of a lot of money into American elections. So in helping to get pro-hunting politicians elected in the US Congress, and including people that they funded include Ryan Zinke, who became Donald Trump's first Interior Secretary, the man responsible for hunting laws in America, and also trophy hunting permits for Americans bringing their trophies home. They put money into the campaign of the US Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo. They put money into the campaign of the Senate leader, Mitch McConnell. They put money into the House Speaker's campaign, etc., etc. And then they also spent an incredible amount of money trying to recruit children. This is one of the big things that the trophy hunting industry is trying to do at the moment. And the reason, of course, it's thinking long term. It wants to continue the industry, continue having business, because a lot of companies make an awful lot of money out of trophy hunting. If you go on a wild lion and elephant hunt in Tanzania or Zimbabwe, you could pay $100,000 for that. That's a lot of money. So the hunting companies get a lot of money, and obviously these are wealthy people who are doing it. So there's a lot of money in the business. Doesn't go to the local community, by the way. They get nothing. They get absolutely nothing.
Quite. And we'll talk about that in detail, because we have reports, we have absolutely factual evidence to support the fact that the money doesn't get to the communities, it doesn't get to conservation.
Oh, it actually doesn't.
The biggest argument of all, but please carry on.
Yeah, no, and they've even teamed up. So Safari Club International, for example, it's actually teamed up with the Salvation Army and the Boy Scouts Association of America in order to recruit children to become trophy hunters.
Which is abuse. Essentially, that's child abuse.
It is, and it's been proven. I also used to work in criminal justice as well. I know it is proven that if you expose children to animal cruelty, animal abuse, they are more likely to be arsonists as teenagers. They are more likely to get involved in violent crime. Actually, 70% of all violent criminals began as animal abusers.
Just sorry to interrupt you. Just say that again, because I want that to land with people, because that's a fact. That's a statistical fact. Say that again. 70% of.
So 70% of violent criminals started out by abusing animals, by being cruel to animals. And it's about desensitization. It's about dominion. And actually, there's some notorious serial killers who were trophy hunters. And anyway, the evidence is overwhelming that if for example, there's communities where there's higher levels of trophy hunters, and therefore there's higher levels of child sex abuse in those areas as well. There's something which criminologists call buck fever, which is around the beginning of the hunting season in the States every year. Domestic violence peaks because all these hunters, they're getting all testosterone up and all the rest of it. So domestic violence suddenly goes right up. So yeah, and the other thing I try to do actually in my book is because I wanted to actually try to understand why, if there was this huge international furore after the killing of Sessile the lion, right? We all remember that. There was huge petitions and everyone was talking about it, and yet nothing changed. Nothing really changed. Had a couple of things. So France banned the import of hunting trophies. Australia did the same. The Netherlands actually did a pretty comprehensive ban. And America did a few, selective bans as well. Actually, the British government said it was going to ban lion hunting trophy imports as well. And then it mysteriously changed its mind, dropped the promise. So I actually wanted to try to understand, why is trophy hunting still going on, given the depth of public feeling, the fact that you have politicians who are speaking out against it as well? Because we often see it in the press about, this horrible individual has just gone and killed this giraffe or this elephant, or whatever, or this nasty. If it's just a bunch of individuals, a bunch of aberrant individuals, that doesn't explain why nothing's changed, because it's relatively easy. I mean, when the Netherlands banned trophy hunting imports, it was literally a ministerial order that was, pumped into the official papers for that day. Job done. 200 species, you can no longer hunt and bring them back to the Netherlands. It was as easy as that. And it could be as easy as that in the UK if our legislators decide to do the same. So it doesn't explain. So I try to understand, what's the power dynamics behind it. And of course, every journalist will say, well, follow the money. So I try to see, where's the money coming from? And yes, of course, there's a lot of money being made by these hunting companies, but who's actually investing in it? Who's got a vested interest? And I found out some interesting things. One is that there's a lot of money pumped into organizations like SCI and so on by gun makers like Beretta. A lot of money pumped into it by ammunition manufacturers like Hornady. Some extraordinary brands that also got a lot of skin in the game, if that's the right expression. So Yamaha was a big sponsor of the hunting industry. The owners of Budweiser, they put a lot of money in. Then you look at and there's oil companies and banking institutions and so on. Then you look at some of the individuals who put really put their dollar in. And one of the guys I came across is called Stephen Chancellor.
Right.
Now, Stephen Chancellor, he is a very, very big donor and fundraiser to Donald Trump. And he also, I've got records which show this, he broke the world record for the largest trophy lion ever shot by a hunter. And in fact, he's got loads of records in the industry's record books. He's been given dozens of prizes and statues and plaques and whatever by the industry. Him and his wife, by the way, his wife, Terry, she's also done things like the African Big Five, which is where you have to shoot at least one lion, one elephant, one rhino, one leopard, and a Cape buffalo. That there used to be so many Cape buffaloes, by the way, that there were millions of them. Almost, there was no end to them. Now they've been hunted, so hard by trophy hunters for the African Big Five and other prizes. There's fewer buffaloes now than there are African elephants, and we know that the African elephant is in big doo-doo.
Yeah, well, absolutely.
There's everything. Anyhow, so follow the money, and you can start to see, okay, so they're getting the money from these very powerful people, so they've got a vested interest, and then the money is going into lobbying these politicians who are now in positions of power, and they're educating or trying to recruit children, and you start to see that it's an industry. It's a multi-million-dollar industry, and it has a very sophisticated lobbying machine, and you have these organizations like Safari Club International, which put a lot of money into lobbying politicians, and they create these front groups, which are conservation organizations. And that, in a nutshell, is why we haven't seen change. They're powerful, they've got a lot of money, they've got politicians under their belt, and they've created this narrative which says, oh, but if you stop trophy hunting, where's the conservation going to come from? But let me just give you one little case study, actually, to just show you, because there is no way on earth that trophy hunting can, even if the money from a trophy hunter actually went into conservation, it would not actually cover the costs of conserving wildlife. So when you shoot something like, let's take the example of Sessile the lion. So when Walter Palmer, the American dentist, shot Sessile, he paid about $50,000 for the whole thing. Something like, let's say, $30,000 would have been the trophy fee. Now, what's the trophy fee? That is the amount of money that goes to the government, ostensibly, into the Environment Department, the Conservation or Wildlife Department, in order to fund wildlife conservation. Now, it does not happen. The money goes into a black hole. It goes into, corrupt politicians' pockets. It disappears. It never goes into conservation. But just for the sake of argument, let's say that $30,000 went directly into conservation. I mean, apart from the whole thing of you shoot an animal in order to conserve other, that's just obviously doesn't work as logic, does it? But let's say the 30,000 went into the conservation. The actual cost of conserving a lion like Sessile and its habitats over its lifetime is going to be about $1 million. It's not me saying this. This is Andrew Loveridge, who's the Oxford University scientist who actually radio collared and monitored Sessile throughout his lifetime until Sessile was shot. So about $1 million. $30,000 does not come close. What does fund conservation is nature tourism. It's photographic tourism. Again, the studies by Andrew Loveridge and anyway, various organizations have shown that an animal like Sessile can generate, through nature tourism, revenues of around $100,000 a year. So with the average lifespan being about 15 years, that's $1.5 million. Your quid's in. So it literally pays to keep the animal alive if what you're after is conservation.
Yeah, absolutely, and these are, again, the statistics that you're referring to, such as the fact that I think, if I'm not mistaken, 40 times more revenue comes from nature tourism than from hunting. So it's that much larger anyway. But the statistics in terms of how much of that money actually gets to communities or to conservation comes from an incredibly reputable and widely accepted report, doesn't it? I mean, which remind us of the name of the report that the bulk of this information comes from? And I know there's several, but
yeah, there are several. I mean, one is a report by IUCN scientists that said essentially, look at the pittance that's going to the local communities from trophy hunting. Compare that with the money, for example, in Kenya, where there's no trophy hunting. They banned trophy hunting in 1977. So what they have is a very, very successful nature tourism industry. And it plows an awful lot more money into anti-poaching work than in countries like Tanzania next door, which have trophy hunting. And it puts a lot more money into the community. So, for example, nowadays, every single child of the Masai tribe can get a high school education that is funded entirely and purely by nature tourism. The revenues from photographic tourism is now allowing Masai children to get a high school education, to become doctors, engineers, become nature leaders, guides, and so on. And so, that's just one of the studies. But there are many. I mean, there was actually one that was a joint study between the UN and a hunting organization called the CIC. And it concluded that nature tourism was far better for conservation than trophy hunting. So even the trophy hunting industry's own research shows that from a conservation point of view only, nature tourism works, trophy hunting does not.
It's one of the things that I find really disappointing about the human race, if I can say that so broadly, is the fact that even if there was, which we're not for one second saying that there is, but even if there was a conservation argument to this, even if there was a conservation achieved by trophy hunting, to think that here we are, the self-proclaimed most intelligent species, and the best we can come up with is selling a ticket to some bloodthirsty hunter with a gun who wants to put a. And by the way, it might just sound like I'm over dramatizing. I've had the displeasure, is the only word I can think of, through a sense of duty of twice going to watch the despicable film, which I won't plug, because I'll caveat this by saying, please do not watch it, because it's a disgraceful, absolutely one-sided, clear case of propaganda, which I tend to think was funded by John Hume, who we'll not even give him the airtime either. But the film called Trophy, which was one of the most disgusting 90 minutes I've ever had to sit through, to watch the sheer joy with which the people they follow kill these beautiful animals. And it has nothing to do with conservation. It has everything to do with that guy that you described who said, have you ever woken up in the morning and just wanted to kill something? Or the one who Nikki Campbell told us about the other day, who said that he had decided to hunt and kill a baboon because he wanted to see what it would feel like to kill a human being. There's nothing conservation related about that. That's a sick, narcissistic, sociopathic psychopathy. And if that's the best you can come up with, if you and I'm saying this directly to any trophy hunters who see this, who are watching this, if the best you can come up with all the intelligence, all the millions of years of evolution to get to this point in life, that you think that the best we can do is put a bullet in the head of an innocent animal, we have seriously lost our way, and we need to be better, because we can be better, and there are better ways. We've proven that. It's being demonstrated elsewhere. You've just given a great example with Kenya.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Andrew Loveridge, actually, the guy who I was mentioning before, the scientist who radio collared at Sessile, he wrote a book actually year before last called Lionhearted, and he talks about, basically how all of the lions were being shot by trophy hunters, even if they had radio collars on, which of course Sessile did as well. But he says, look, man, or humankind, we've put man on the moon. We've split the atom. Surely there has to be a better way of conserving our wildlife than killing it for fun. And it's absolutely right, of course. But look, it obviously doesn't make sense. And you look again at what the industry is actually doing and still calling this conservation. So the canned hunting industry. Let's talk about the canned hunting industry, which is part of trophy hunting. So at the moment, you've got 10,000 lions that are sat in cages in South Africa. They've been bred for the bullet, right? They've been bred in these cages. They'll be shot in an enclosure from which they've got no hope of escape. And 6,000 lion cubs are bred for this every year, by the way, by these people. And and the hunter, inverted commas, because you're getting right up close to the animal. There's a British hunter who did a story about him in the Sunday Times a while ago. He's a gas engineer from Norfolk, and he boasts about how he was managed to get 8 yards away from this lion before he shot it. Well, of course he did, because this animal's tame. It's been brought up, with keepers. He probably thought the guy was bringing it some food. Yeah, he thought, is it time for my kitty cat?
Right.
And the guy gets up to it and shoots it from 8 yards and goes, way, and then he poses for it. It looks like he's wild. What a hero. And he got this massive...
We had Will Travers on a couple of weeks ago, and he spoke about the canned hunting industry, and as you quite rightly said, these are tame lions, and the reason why is because they've been put through this process, whereas cubs, they've been petted and by unwitting volunteers who think that they're helping with conservation, that with an orphaned lion, not realizing they've been bred for the bullet, as you said. Then they do walking safaris, and then they're released for the hunt. And of course, they're not out of it yet, because then their bones are sold for Chinese wine and really important things like that.
Wine. Yeah, exactly. And it's become a huge industry, and it's fueling demand. And so what's actually happening is that it's fueling poaching of wild lions too, because in order to keep up with demand, they're having to go and get more lions. But also, there's a real problem of inbreeding inside these facilities. I mean, they're like factory farms. They really are. Yeah. And because of the numbers of animals and the appalling conditions and the problems with disease and inbreeding and all the rest of it, so they have to go and freshen their DNA stock, if you like, their bloodline. And what they do is they go across the border into Botswana, they shoot the adult lions, and then they bring back the cubs using cattle rustling routes and stick them in their facilities, and that's how they, or go to those sanctuaries like you were, so-called sanctuaries that you're talking about, where you've got volunteers who think that they're doing something good for conservation. They don't know that actually this is all part of the industry, and yeah, it's just a vicious cycle, and you've got this demand now for bottles of Chinese lion wine, which go for hundreds of dollars. It's a real status thing.
Yeah, it is, and I want to draw attention to the fact that you personally, and through the campaign, you expose so much of this kind of thing, because we spoke about this on the phone yesterday, I think it was, where I had become aware of what you had actually caused to be in the press, which is that one of the latest fads in certain parts of the world, which is bear paw soup.
Yeah.
This is what we're dealing with, and this, I mean, I don't want to get into that because it's unrelated to trophy hunting and the issues there, but it
is related.
Well, it is. Yes, it is.
Yeah, no, you know what? It is actually related. Let me tell you why. Because we have this legal loophole in CITES says you can't, it's supposed to stop wildlife trafficking and poaching, but you've got this exemption for trophy hunters. So wildlife trafficking syndicates, criminal syndicates, international crime gangs have cottoned on, and they're using trophy hunting permits in order to poach. They've done that with rhinos, for example. So there was a number of court cases actually in South Africa years ago where they found that literally there was Thai crime kingpins who were flying these prostitutes over from Vietnam, right, and getting them to pose as trophy hunters. They'd get a little bit of the money, and they'd turn up in like sneakers. When they come from villages and rural areas, they were peasants, some of them, so they'd never held a rifle before, let alone they weren't hunters. And they were basically there to sign off on the CITES form to pretend that there was a trophy hunting. And actually, because there was a number of Vietnamese groups that were doing this as a conduit into China, and that got closed down. So now the Chinese have cut out the middleman altogether. So today, China is the biggest importer of rhino trophies. Right? 10 years ago, there was no such thing as a Chinese trophy hunter. There was no such thing. Literally, I think there was 18 permits that were issued to Chinese trophy hunters a decade ago. This year it's 2,142. Right? So this is being used as a way to get those body parts, commercial purposes, and so on. And you're talking about bears there. So the same happens with bears. Polar bears. We were talking about this earlier. We were talking about polar bears because we've done this short film that's gone out today on social media, and Ricky Gervais has retweeted it, and it's gone viral. And one of the things that we talk about in there, it's a very short film, it's only about a minute, but it shows how polar bears are being shot as hunting trophies, in inverted commas, but including for their genitalia, their penises, literally, and for their gallbladders, in order to turn that into bile. And all these things are used in so-called traditional Chinese medicines as aphrodisiacs and potions and for all sorts of ailments. So and we've got that awful situation that you were mentioning there about bear paw soup. Yeah, so you've got people who are literally trapping bears in the US in order to put these things into restaurants for very wealthy clients. But there's an awful lot of the bear bile industry that is done under the cover of trophy hunting. So a lot of people know about, for example, how they have a lot of moon bears that are kept in captivity in awful conditions, and how they're milked for their bile in very cruel conditions. Well, actually, there's a lot of moon bears that are also shot in the wild for the same reason, but also brown bears and black bears. By the way, black bear hunting is the biggest form of trophy hunting on the planet. So there is a colossal industry in bear hunting, which this is going to surprise a lot of people. Canada is the actual biggest exporter of hunting trophies in the world because of the huge bear hunting industry it has. Black bears, brown bears, but also polar bears. It's the only country in the world where you can go and shoot polar bears for fun or under the cover of being a trophy hunter to get its penises or whatever. And I know that this has actually ended up in China. I've got proof of this, where trophy hunters have shot polar bears, and then the genitalia has ended up in the Chinese markets. That's what's happening today. So this is another reason we've got to really shut this industry down, because it's just being used as an escape route, a get out of jail card, if you like, by the wildlife traffickers and the poachers and the crime syndicates.
Absolutely. And it's hardly far-fetched either. It's something that some people, I think, struggle to believe, just flat out believe that kind of twisted corruption exists, and it can be so essentially mainstream and tolerated or permitted or turned a blind eye to. But it's happening all around us. It's constant. We see it in this country. I mean, for goodness sake, we see it flouted with the fox hunting that takes place here, which has supposedly been banned for 10 or 15 years, and which is still flouted by means of trail hunting, which doesn't even exist. And it's the same thing everywhere. There's these whether it's trade routes, whether it's permits, all the exploitation, all the ways around these rules that people find. It's a real thing, and it's happening all the time. But we spoke earlier on about this. One of the things that I just think is so, again, you've got all these facts, and it's so powerful. But at the same time, what I feel it could all be underpinned with is that simple conversation we had earlier on, where we could be successful, and we'll talk about your aims, what you're striving to achieve with this overall, and you might achieve it, and we could achieve various different regulations and bans and rules. But the key is, and this is the thing that again comes, I find myself circling back around to all the time. The key thing is, what is wrong in the mind of a human being that they need rules to prevent them from going out and killing, in one example, as you just described, a polar bear, that desperately clinging to existence on the brink of extinction because of mankind, because of hunting, because of global warming, because of human population explosions and human wildlife conflict, and all the things that we know are impacting wildlife across the world. What is it about the wiring in a certain person's brain that makes them think that that's a good thing to do? And that where's the compassion, where's the empathy, where's the attempt to find an alternative solution which is compassionate? What's wrong with we've talked a few times on this broadcast about the distinct lack of compassion. Why is it not on the agenda in schools? It should be on the curriculum. And who would lose out from that? Who would not benefit from a world that's filled with more compassionate generations coming through, who don't want to stick a bullet in the head of an innocent animal? And I don't care whether that animal's past its prime, or whether it's a trouble, whatever they call them, where it's a problem animal, because of the fact that it's trampled somebody's crops or whatever it may be. Guess what? That wasn't crops before, it was natural habitat, and we've encroached on that. But nobody ever wants to have the conversation from a realistic start point. They want to have it from a position of convenience, which is, well, we have this, and that's a pest, whether it's a fox or an elephant or a lion.
Yeah, and it means a completely different mindset, because so many of the problems that we face today, whether it's climate change, destruction of biodiversity, even the pandemic that's going on at the moment, it's because of our actions. It's because of our lifestyles. It's the way that we work, live, and play. Those are choices that we make. Now, we can't always make the perfect choices, but we can always make better choices. And this is something about, it is a mindset. It's an attitude that says we have to understand the impact of our lifestyles, of what we do and how we do it on the living world around us, because we're part of that living world. We're not, we're not above it or separate from it. Whether we like it or not, we have no choice. We are part of that. And if we abuse the planet's ecosystems, it's going to come back and bite us on the bum. And that's what's happening right now.
Happening right now.
It's happening with climate change. And if we lose some of these apex predators like lions and so on, that's going to impact ecosystems. It's going to end up, impacting us. Hippos, for example, when they manure riverbeds, that actually, creates fertile grounds for other species and oxygenates water, etc., etc. This whole thing of ecosystem services. We don't maybe need to monetize it quite like that, but the point is that everything has value. And until we understand that, we're always going to be in trouble. I remember, I used to work in the climate change field as well. And I remember having a conversation with somebody who was part of a climate action organization like myself. And he was basically saying to me, look, Eduardo, I'm in this because I want to have the exact same lifestyle that I've got now, but I just want it powered by renewable energy. And I said, you know what? You are actually part of the problem, because that is not going to fix it. A technological fix, it's like whack-a-mole. We might sort of hit that problem down for a while, but then something else is going to crop up. And we know already that, obviously, I mean, I live off grid actually. So, we are totally powered by our own sun, solar panels. But we also have very, very low consumption appliances. What we could do is just plaster everything with solar panels and have an exorbitant lifestyle and say, well, we're carbon neutral. But that's when you mine for the raw materials that go into making panels and the other because you've got regulators, you've got inverters, you've got all this other the batteries as well. If you're essentially trying to just mimic the same lifestyle that you had before, you're still having a major impact, whether it's in the mining of those resources or so on. So it is about thinking of the choices of the clothes that I wear, the materials that our house actually is biodegradable. Right? It's made of rammed earth, so it's 60 centimeter thick, mud bricks. And here in Portugal, the temperatures, vary a lot from winter to summer. So you go down to 0 in the winter, 45 degrees in the summer. The internal temperatures will hardly vary between 15 to 25 because of the thermal insulation of a natural material. You could always know exactly how many people built a particular cottage by looking at the roof tiles. Now, how do you do that? Because the way they used to do it, they'd get the earth, the clay, and they would shape the roof tile on their thigh. And then you'd work out that there's different widths of thigh evident on the roof. So you could, so 6 people built this house because there's 6 different widths of thigh on that roof. The wood beams, again, it's sort of all cut actually from 100-meter radius. And I mean, one can become obsessive about this, but we do need to actually start questioning in every direction, questioning ourselves, the assumptions that we make, and the things that we take for granted. But we also have to question the system, if you want to call it that. Make the system work for us. Don't be afraid to ask awkward questions.
Right.
There was a wonderful Quaker shepherdess that I knew 30 years ago. Very small lady, and she was a pacifist, but very small, gentle little figure of a woman. And she once said to me, Eduardo, if you're not peeing them off, you're not doing your job. And I've just sort of held that. I mean, I don't go out of my way to wind people up, but you've got to make waves if things are wrong. We are intelligent, and those of us who are on this, you and I, people, we have the privilege of being educated, of having access to media and social media, of being able to communicate with politicians and so on. And that is a very privileged thing to have. So we have a responsibility with all those rights that have been won through democracy and the fights for the suffrage and so on. We have a responsibility to make democracy work, no more so than now, arguably, where there is this extraordinary shift towards extreme populism happening in parts of the world. Probably the less said about that, the better. But, we are actually at a critical junction, I think, in human history. We've got some big decisions to make, and we've got to make them pretty quickly, because we could very quickly go off the deep end. I mean, we're pretty close to it right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Eduardo, as I said at the beginning that we could probably talk for hours, and we, believe it or not, have already been talking for more than an hour, even though it flies. But we have some time to cover some other things, and I really want to use this opportunity in the last sort of 10 minutes we have to give people. I'm going to share it on screen as well, but I would love for you to talk about it. Some information about how they can get involved, because of course everything you spoke about and everything you started by speaking about with regards to holding our members of parliament accountable because they work for us, you've made that easy for them to do, haven't you? And I can share this part of your webpage right here. Brilliant. And guys, what I'm going to do right now while I'm saying this is I'm going to click into the chat. I'm going to put the link directly to this so you can click it, but you'll be able to click it afterwards, and Eduardo will explain what it is. Go for it, Eduardo.
So there is something called an early day motion that's in front of Parliament at the moment. And it's kind of like a petition for MPs. And the more MPs you get signing it, the more it says to the government, we've got to do something about this. This is a political priority. So early day motion 50 on the ban on trophy imports has already been signed by over 150 members of parliament from 8 different parties, which is, I mean, it's an extraordinary achievement, but we've got to get even more. So what we've done, we've got this thing on the website, which you can see just there, right there, that says quick link to the petition. Now, if you click on that, it'll do 2 things for you really quickly and simply. Firstly, it will automatically send an email to your MP saying sign EDM 50, because when you go in there, you put in your name and you put in your postcode. The program automatically detects which parliamentary constituency you live in and who the MP for that constituency is. So you press that button, you put in your name and postcode, bang, an email goes straight off to that MP and says, I want you to sign EDM 50. And the more that sign, I mean, they're signing all the time. We had another 2 Conservatives sign today. So it's growing all the time. So the more MPs that we get signing that, the better. And there's a very good reason for that right now as well. Because, I mean, yeah, we've come very, very far, I think, in Britain on this issue, where, you know, the campaign started barely a year and a half ago. And we had this extraordinary situation, actually, at the general election, where every single party put a ban on trophy hunting imports in their manifesto. You know, it was a manifesto commitment by the Conservatives, by Labour, by the Liberal Democrats, by the SNP, by the Greens, by Plaid Cymru, etc. It was, everyone had it in their manifesto. And it was in the Queen's Speech, which is the, you know, government programme. It's the listing of the bills, if you like, the laws that the government's going to bring in. And Boris Johnson himself, he's been on Twitter. He has said, it was actually about one of our stories, it is time to end this barbaric practice. That's what Boris Johnson said on Twitter. And a few weeks ago, there was an MP, a Conservative MP, Pauline Latham MP, at Prime Minister's questions time, stood up and said, Prime Minister, what are you going to do about trophy hunting? And Boris Johnson, in front of Parliament, in front of the cameras. So, you know, when you say something in the House of Commons, you can't lie in the House of Commons. It's one of those few things that you're not supposed to do by tradition. He said, yes, the government is going to bring in a ban on trophy hunting imports. So we've pushed everyone, you know, to create these conditions for this to happen. And then, of course, this little pandemic happened. Now, we actually had, I skipped a step here, because we managed to get the government to hold a public consultation. And that's a normal thing that happens when you bring about a new bill. You go out and say, look, here's the different ideas on how to implement a ban or not a ban. What do people think? And provide us evidence. And they put up 4 options, actually. The government said, so one is just a ban on endangered species. One is doing it on a case-by-case basis, you know, just reviewing every application for a trophy import. The third option 3 was complete ban. That was obviously the one that we were promoting. And then option 4 was status quo, no change. And thousands and thousands and thousands of people wrote to the government, which is amazing, saying we want option 3, we support total ban, etc., etc. So the public consultation finished, and then the world had this small hiccup of a COVID-19. So kind of everything is clogged up inside the government machine at the moment. You know, it's kind of like a gunk in your fuel tank. You know, it's stuck in there. And in fact, quite a few MPs over the last few days have been tabling questions. MPs from Liberal Democrats, SNP, Labour, the ones I've seen, I think the Conservatives as well, been asking the government, so you said you were going to bring in a ban. When are you going to do it? We've had the public consultation. That's finished. When are you going to come forward with your proposals? And the government is now saying, well, oof, you know, we're a bit busy at the moment and we'll try and get around to it. Well, look, we've come this far. We've now got to push this over the threshold. Yeah, we've got it's the one last big heave. So this EDM, this petition that you're now seeing on the screen, the click here to petition your MP, this is crucial, because the more MPs that sign this early day motion, this EDM, the more pressure the government is under to say, oh, bloody hell, we've just got to get on with this. We promised it, and now everyone's saying we've got to do it. And yeah, they're waiting. We've kept them waiting. And now all of these MPs from every single party are now putting pressure on us. You know, it's the old postbag thing that I was talking about before. MPs watch the postbag. Ministers watch the polls. So if there's all this stuff that's coming at them saying, You've got to do it. We want you to do it. For us, it's a priority. You've promised it. We're not going to let you off the hook now. You've already come up with proposals. You've done the public consultation. Let's get the ban done, to paraphrase a phrase that was famous a few weeks ago. So sign that EDM. That's the message to MPs, and we've made it as easy as possible. Just literally click on that. You put in your name and your postcode, and a message goes to your member of parliament, your local MP, straight away.
And I have put that for you guys on the screen, but obviously, as you know, it's not clickable on the screen, but it is also in the comments. You'll find it in the comments. So or just obviously tap it into your browser. And as Eduardo's just explained, it's a hugely powerful thing you can do. So as we always try to give you a call to action, which doesn't involve dipping into your pocket, well, money is potentially very tight. This is something hugely powerful that you can do. Eduardo, you've created such an incredible momentum with this. I think this is such a crucial time for people to get behind this, because we think, as we were discussing earlier, we're kind of creeping towards some significant change.
Yeah.
And so if I can implore you guys to click, and as Eduardo said, you'll be signing that petition and sending a letter all at the click of a button to your MP. Share it, please, far and wide with people who, even if they're not engaged in the issue, who will do it because you ask them to. The more people that do this, the more powerful it is, and the faster we can see change. And with that in mind, I mean, what occurs to me listening to you talk, Eduardo, and all a lot of our guests, because as we've discussed a few times, it doesn't matter whether we're talking about orphaned baby mice that break my heart because they don't survive, or whether we're talking about the decades-long systematic slaughter of animals for sport. What really unsettles me, but is very much prevalent thought in my mind, is the fact that we as a species, we've talked about the fact we're the self-proclaimed, because I say self-proclaimed very deliberately, because I don't consider us to be the most intelligent species, because what species that's intelligent would destroy its own habitat? I mean, that just doesn't make any sense to me, and that's among a lot of other things, of course. But what occurs to me is that we do have the capacity for unbelievable creation and achievement and beauty as a species, but we also sadly have the ability for unthinkable destruction. And what I wish more than anything is to see a shift to being driven by compassion and by love and beauty and all the things that what's wrong with those things? Where do those conversations stop being important, and aggression and selfishness and profit and greed and material gain is so much more important and focused on by governments, by people, by organizations? If we could shift that back, everything would change, and this would be a byproduct. We wouldn't be having these conversations. We wouldn't have to have a campaign to ban these things. And just one final thought on that before I hand over to you for final thoughts, because I know that you'll have messages for people that you want to leave this with, and I want you to have that. But in the specific conversation about trophy hunting, here's the problem I have, and not that I take on board, because I think they're deeply flawed arguments, but I don't take on board the arguments about contributions to conservation and trophy hunting. I don't take that on board at all. I listen, but I never hear anything compelling. But what I find much more compelling than that is the fact that I don't see ever a reluctance in trophy hunters. I don't see trophy hunters walking reluctantly into the field saying, guys, we don't want to do this. I don't want to keep shooting them. Please come up with a better idea and I'll stop shooting them. If you can find another way to conserve them, I won't pull the trigger. No trophy hunters doing it reluctantly.
No.
So no. I don't believe
the companies that sell these holidays, they sell the adrenaline rush. They sell the excitement, the pounding hearts. At the end of the day, they're putting it in those terms because that's what sells. Okay, that's what the punter, the trophy hunter, is looking for. They're not wanting, I want to go and shoot animals so that I can help the poor Africans. I'm going to go and shoot animals because this is going to be great for future generations of lions. No, they do it because, there was Piers Morgan, who, by the way, is really strong on this issue. He absolutely detests trophy hunters. And I was on this show with him about a year ago, as me and Ranulph Fiennes, and a guy who was the president of the UK Safari Club International branch. And it went viral, actually, because Piers Morgan threatened to spear this guy live in the studio, hang him up on the wall, and said, "How would you like that?" Well, of course, that just went nuts on social media. But much more telling was this: he was persisting with the trophy hunter was persisting with, well, we do it, it has these benefits, and we sometimes give meat to the local villagers, and we say, and Piers Morgan was having none of it. And he was pressing him and saying, "No, but what do you really do? Why do you do that?" And at the end, this guy just crumbles. He caves. He goes, "We do it because we enjoy it." And it was like that. Suddenly, the truth. We cut through all the crap, all the justifications, all the secondary rationalizations, all of that. He finally fessed up and said, "Yeah, we do it because we think that's what's fun." And that is the mindset that has got to change. And so, we do have a complex task to achieve. It isn't just about rules and regulations. It is about a mindset, because this isn't the only problem in the world. We know that. There's many others. But I'll tell you why this is an important one, because it is winnable. And we need victories. We need victories in order to win other victories. This is a victory that is, in front of us. It's right there. It's for the taking. We are so close. And if we win this one, we're going to win other things. We're going to be able to potentially get the Hunting Act properly enforced, with actual jail sentences for people who go fox hunting and go and kill cubs in the autumn. And at the moment, they get a slap on the wrist and a fine if they're lucky, if anyone bothers to prosecute. And it's about saying, this is happening right here as well. This kind of sport hunting that's going on, it is indivisible. It's about it's the grouse moor shooting. It's all of these things. It's about the wildlife trade. It's about so many things. So let's win this one. And with that, I always like the analogy of the door. One can be hammering away at a door, making a lot of noise forever and ever and ever. And you're going to get sore. You're going to get sore throat, sore fists, and eventually you're going to tire. The door doesn't open. The other thing you could do, the alternative, is to be smart and know how to unlock that door and wedge it open and get your foot in the door. And once you've got your foot in the door, then you throw your weight behind it and you get that door flung open. You fling that door wide open, and you really, really start addressing fundamental issues and problems when it comes to animal welfare, the way that we treat living creatures with whom we share this earth, who have the same right to inhabit this space, this biosphere that we do, no more, no less. And it is about, you're talking about compassion before. It's compassion, it's kindness, it's respect. It's those things that have to be part. And I agree, it should be part of the national curriculum. Education today is absolutely useless. It does not teach us any of the things that are going to prepare us to encounter the challenges that we are facing already right now, and we're going to have to find solutions for if we're going to survive, let alone thrive. People don't know where food comes from, don't know about the preciousness of soil and how you conserve it. They don't know about, the living environment around us, the buildings and so on. They don't understand the psychology of urban living. There's so many things that, because there is I said it because there's a link between sort of being in a closed urban environment and mental health issues, and mental health is now starting finally to be understood as a serious issue in medical terms, so that we need to grasp those concepts of compassion, kindness, respect, and actually make them part of what we teach our offspring and our peers, the people around us. Education it's a lifelong thing. It's something that should be done in community with people around us. And it's when we got this little small holding in Portugal, and we got it 30 years ago, and our neighbour, he was a 75-year-old peasant farmer, as you might call it, and he didn't have electricity, didn't have running water. And he was illiterate, because in the olden days here, in the days before the revolution, and we had democracy, before there was a fascist dictatorship, and it was keeping poor people poor and uneducated. That was the political strategy, and so people didn't have access to education. I learnt so much more with this so-called uneducated peasant than I learned in all of my years at school and university and much more. It was eye-opening. It was, about understanding the phases of the moon. It was about irrigation. It was about keeping cool in extreme heat and warm in the. And he would sometimes just pop over. He was just a delight to have around. He sometimes just would pop over and he'd sit under a cork tree by the back of the cottage with one of his dogs, and he'd sing to his dog, right? And that was just the way he was. And what a wonderful way to be and to feel. They inspired a lot of what I think I now try and do is kind of in memory of some of these people and how they created this extraordinary living landscape that we have around us of, because I've got, a little bit of land, not very much, but we've got so much wildlife here. I know that because we put camera traps down and we've got all sorts of things. We got some baby wild boar on our cameras the other day, and and it's just a privilege to be able to be up close to nature. Anyhow, that's just really coming back to your point that we do need to rethink education, and I think we fundamentally need to rethink our lifestyles, the things that we do for work, the things that we enjoy doing for leisure as well. It's about fundamental change as well, but one step at a time. Here's one we can win. It will make a big difference. It'll make a huge difference, because then other countries in Europe are going to think, maybe we should be thinking about banning trophy. And already they're saying that. They're watching what's happening in Britain, and they're thinking, do you know what? Maybe we should be doing this. And we've got now a lot of NGO partners in Belgium and Switzerland and Finland and Spain, all over the European Union, who are saying, right, let's work together. Let's get this banned from the whole of the EU. And so everyone is, and you've already got politicians who've been doing feasibility studies on the global abolition of trophy hunting. Wow. Yeah, that has actually been done. There are studies that have been done by civil servants, commissioned by ministers, that are looking into this, right? Yeah. So this could be the beginning of the end, the end of a chapter that should have been closed centuries ago. We banned bear baiting and dog fighting 200 years ago in Britain. Okay, it's about time we sorted this one out. And I say we because Britain was very much an exporter and inventor of trophy hunting. It took trophy hunting to Africa, and then it sort of grew from there. And anyway, we can win this. Once we've won this, we can win other things. So that link that you've got there on the screen, that's step number one. That's step one. Click on that and share it with people, because I tell you, people feel very strongly about this issue. There ain't going to be a member of the family or a relative or somebody at work who isn't, who's likely to disagree with you on this. The polls show that people are universally against trophy hunting. So share it far and wide, because the more people that write to their MP, the more that postbag fills up, the more pressure the politician feels. They put their name on the EDM, and the government's thinking, oh, bloody hell, yeah, we've got to do this, because government works like that. And I say that somebody who's worked inside. You only do something if you absolutely have to. Right. And that's particularly the way that civil servants work. There's an inbuilt inertia inside government ministries. Right. But if you create the political conditions, the political pressure, then that unlocks the door, and then march right in and ask for the sky. But let's get that door open now. And it's as simple as following that click right there.
And that's the call to action, as we've talked about, that one step that Eduardo's saying you can take, and one step at a time. But Eduardo, I want to say to you that you have taken monumental steps forward on our behalf, on all of our behalf, to get us to this point, to get us to the point of the political conditions, as you've said, that are ripe for change. You've done so much for this cause, and for that we thank you so wholeheartedly. Before we go, I want to say to you guys to join me on Saturday, which is the 13th at 7 p.m, when I'll be talking to Dominic Dyer, a wonderful friend to many of us, an incredible, powerful, vocal, outspoken animal champion, hero, and he will be with me right here at 7 p.m. on Saturday, which I think is fantastic. Wouldn't you agree? And anyone who knows. So
I know Dominic well, and he's worth every penny.
And Eduardo, you're one in a billion, and I want to thank you for the time you've given us. And as you guys can see, Eduardo has passion and compassion in equal measure. And what you've done, as I say, is for the cause and for the animals. We thank you from the bottom of our hearts, and thank you for spending the time with us this evening. It's been absolutely wonderful to have you. And for you folks, see you Saturday at 7 p.m. Thank you so much for joining us. Till next time.